Okay, let's get into it. Today, we're diving deep into something that, well, probably almost every single person learning English bumps up against at some point.
Oh, absolutely. It's a really common hurdle.
Yeah, you're trying to speak, right. You've got a thought, an idea, maybe a question you want to ask, and then what happens?
The roadblock.
Exactly. Instead of the English just, flowing out smoothly, you hit this kind of mental speed bump. You can almost feel yourself doing it, translating.
hmm You think at first in your native language, then you're mentally searching, finding the English words, figuring out how to put them together.
Trying to get the grammar right.
Right. And then finally, after all that internal work, you actually say it out loud.
And that whole process, that internal translation step, it's like the main bottleneck, isn't it?
It really is. It just eats up time, precious seconds, sometimes longer, that make your speaking feel slow, maybe hesitant.
Yeah, it really breaks the flow. It's like trying to have a natural flowing conversation while you're constantly flipping through a mental dictionary and like a grammar rule book inside your head.
The rhythm's just gone.
Yeah.
It feels effortful, not spontaneous.
Exactly. And here's the other thing. Even if you manage to get the grammar technically correct, that habit of translating word for word or maybe phrase for phrase, it can make your sentences sound, well, just a bit off.
A bit unnatural.
Yeah, unnatural to a native speaker. Like the structure might be okay on paper, but the actual phrasing feels stiff, maybe a little stilted. It just doesn't have that, natural cadence.
Which is such a contrast to how native speakers operate, right? They're not translators.
Original.
A thought pops up, an idea, maybe they see something or hear something, and that connects, boom, directly to the English words and the sentence structures they need to express it.
It's a direct line.
Yeah, there's no intermediate step of, like, converting it from some other language first. It's direct mapping,
Yeah.
concept, straight to English.
Okay, but here's the really good news, and this is the core idea we're digging into today based on our source material. That translation habit. It's not like hardwired into your brain forever.
No, definitely not. It's a learned behavior.
Exactly. And like any learned behavior, you can change it. You absolutely can train your brain to start thinking directly in English, to bypass that clunky, slow translation step.
It's a skill. And like any skill, you can develop it with practice.
And the payoff is huge, right? The source points this out clearly.
Oh yeah, the benefits are really profound.
Yeah.
When you train your brain this way to think directly in English, your speaking speed picks up, like noticeably,
Faster responses.
much faster.
Yeah.
Your fluency improves because you're not hitting those pause and translate moments nearly as often. Things just flow better.
And confidence.
Oh, massively. Your confidence just soars because the language starts to feel less like this external code you have to constantly decipher and translate into, and more like a natural, direct extension of your own thoughts.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive then. We're going to lay out exactly how you can start making that shift happen. We're taking the insights from the source material and we're going to, break them down step by step.
Right. We'll start by really getting under the hood of why this translation trap happens in the first place. What's the mechanism?
Then we'll walk through the specific practical steps, the actual exercises the source recommends to train your brain to build those direct English pathways.
We'll look at, like, what daily exercises can help reinforce this new way of thinking.
And also some simple techniques that sort of naturally emerge from this training, things that can help you respond faster and sound more natural in actual conversations.
Yeah, the goal here is that by the end of this, you won't just understand why you might be translating in your head, but you'll have a really clear, actionable roadmap.
You'll know exactly how to start training your brain for that faster, smoother, more confident English thinking, building those direct lines from your thoughts straight into English words.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of it. It's fascinating stuff.
All right, let's start right at the beginning then, the foundation. We need to get a handle on the root cause. Why is it so common for English learners to fall into this translation loop? What's actually happening inside the brain?
Well, at its core, it really comes down to the brain's amazing efficiency, actually, and its established habits. Your brain has spent years, maybe decades, building this incredibly complex and efficient system around your native language.
That's its home base, its default setting.
Exactly. It's the network it knows best, the one it can access and process information within most quickly and with the least effort. It's optimized for your first language.
Makes sense.
Now, when you start learning a new language, like English, your brain tries to integrate this new stuff in what seems like the most logical way at first. So when you encounter a new English word, let's take a super simple one, like table.
Okay, table.
Your brain doesn't usually, right at the beginning, create a totally separate new connection between the idea or the concept of a table and the English sound or word table.
It doesn't just map table directly onto the image of a table.
Not initially, for many learners. What it often does instead is it connects the English word table to the word you already know for table in your native language.
Ah, okay. So it's like the brain goes, right, I've got this concept stored flat top, 4 legs, you put things on it. In my main language, I call that native word for table. Now, these English speakers call it table. Okay, got it. Table equals native word for table.
Precisely. It's essentially mapping the new English vocabulary onto the existing deeply ingrained linguistic system. It already understands really well. It builds these little bridges, these cross-linguistic links.
Linking the new word to the familiar one.
Yeah, and honestly, this is actually a very effective strategy when you're first starting out and just trying to acquire vocabulary. It leverages all the knowledge you already have to make sense of the new language. You're basically building a mental glossary, pairing up English words with their equivalents in your native tongue.
Which is great for comprehension, right? For reading, for learning lists of words.
Absolutely helpful for receptive skills.
But then the problem kicks in when you want to produce the language, when you want to speak quickly.
That's exactly where the issue arises. Because when you want to talk about a table, your brain, being efficient, tends to follow the strongest, most practiced pathway it has.
The path of least resistance.
Right. So the thought or the concept of table comes up. Your brain's default system is still your native language. So it accesses the native word or phrase for table first.
Because that connection is super strong.
Super strong, super fast. And then it uses that little cross-linguistic bridge it built earlier to find the corresponding English word table or the structure needed.
Ah, okay. I see the sequence now. It becomes thought or concept pops into your head, which triggers your native language system.
Which then uses the bridge to access the English language system.
Which finally leads to you saying the English word or sentence.
That's the translation loop right there in action. That extra hop, that detour through the native language system, that's what introduces the delay.
It's literally extra steps in the mental process.
Exactly. Extra processing stages. Your brain is doing a 2-stage conversion before the English comes out. And that naturally requires more cognitive effort and, crucially, more time than if it could just access the English directly.
Okay, that makes complete sense now. The very mechanism that helped us get started learning vocabulary can actually become the barrier to real fluency later on.
It can, yeah. It's a common developmental stage.
So the whole point of the training methods we're about to discuss, the core mission, is basically to forge and then strengthen those direct links, the ones that go straight from thought concept directly to the English language system.
That's the goal.
So the brain learns it can bypass that native language detour when it's time to speak English.
Exactly right. It's all about building new, more efficient neural pathways, specifically for producing English. It's like creating express lanes that skip the native language junction altogether. You're essentially retraining your brain's default setting, but specifically for active English use.
Okay, the why is crystal clear now. Let's get practical. How do we actually do this? Where does the source suggest we start laying the tracks for these new, direct English pathways?
Right. The first step, as the source outlines it, is actually surprisingly simple. And importantly, it's entirely internal. You don't need anyone else around. It's about consciously starting to use simple English words inside your own head as you go about your day.
So not necessarily speaking out loud?
Not at all, initially.
Yeah.
You could do this completely silently, even when you're surrounded by people or just sitting quietly. It's about deliberately changing the language you use for your internal monologue, your private thoughts.
Okay, changing the language of thought, that sounds significant.
It is. Most people naturally have their internal thoughts running predominantly in their native language. This first step is about intentionally, consciously introducing English into that private mental space.
And how do we begin? What's the simplest way in?
The source suggests starting by just describing what you see around you, silently, using simple English words or phrases.
Okay, let's flesh that out with some concrete examples from the source material. What would that actually look like, say, moment to moment?
Okay, think about really ordinary moments in your day. Maybe you're just walking outside. Instead of your usual internal thought, which might be, native language thought, equivalent to, wow, the sun is really bright today, you make a conscious effort to think silently in English. The sun is shining brightly.
Okay. Or maybe you're waiting for a bus and you see someone walk past. Instead of thinking in your native language, like native language thought for, that person is wearing a green jacket.
You consciously form the English thought. I see a person with a green jacket. or maybe just green jacket. Even single words help build the connection.
Or sitting in traffic, you see a sports car zoom past. Instead of native language thought, that car is fast, you think.
That car is really fast.
Yeah.
Exactly. You were taking these real-world things, the sun, a person's jacket, a car, and you're attaching the English words or simple sentences directly to that reality, right there inside your own mind.
Without going through the native language first.
That's the key. You're actively trying to bypass any internal native language intermediary. You see the fast car, you directly access and think the English phrase fast car or that car is fast.
I get it. It's like you're starting to build direct mental labels for the world around you, but using only English for those labels. So instead of the process being, see the sun, think native word for sun, then translate to the English word sun.
The goal is to make it. See the sun. Think the English word sun immediately.
Right. You're actively training your brain to associate the English words directly with the actual objects, the actions, the states you perceive in your environment.
Precisely. And this is so foundational because it starts creating and strengthening those new direct connections. And it starts with the most common, most accessible concepts, literally the things right there in front of your eyes.
It sounds almost too simple, doesn't it? Just thinking words in my head.
It does sound simple on the surface, but I think its power lies in its consistency and its directness. You're performing these little mental repetitions again and again, associating English directly with reality. Not associating English with another word in another language. That's the crucial difference.
Okay. I can see how doing that consistently, even for short periods throughout the day, would start to build a new mental habit. You're consciously redirecting your internal language pattern.
Exactly. You're carving out those new pathways little by little.
Okay, so step one is that internal description using simple English. What's the next layer the source suggests we add on top of that?
Step 2 builds directly on this principle of direct association, but it makes it a bit more focused, a bit more active.
Okay.
It's about deliberately, actively naming specific objects in English whenever you see them. Again, this can still be purely internal, just in your head, or maybe a very quiet whisper if you happen to be alone.
So it's shifting from describing a whole scene like the sun is shining to picking out individual items within the scene.
Yes, exactly. You look around your environment, you consciously identify specific objects, and you immediately access and use their English name. For instance, if you're at home, just scan the room you're in right now.
Okay.
And think, or whisper quietly, table, chair, lamp, window.
Curtain.
That's my phone. This is my water bottle. That's a picture frame.
Perfect. Or if you walk into the kitchen, refrigerator, microwave, sink, faucet, fork, spoon, plate, cup.
Just naming everything I see.
Just naming. And again, on the surface, just listing nouns might seem really elementary, right? Like something you do in your very first English lesson.
Yeah, it feels basic.
But the source specifically emphasizes that this might sound simple, but it's powerful. And the reason it's powerful is because of the sheer repetition involved and, again, that direct link you're forging and reinforcing every single time.
Okay, a job, immediately access and use the English word for it. That's the loop you're building. It's like doing reps at the gym. But this is for your brain's language processing pathways. Every time you see, say, a chair, and you immediately think or whisper, chair in English.
That specific connection between the visual input, seeing the chair, and the English word chair gets a tiny bit stronger, a tiny bit faster.
Precisely. You are gradually making the English word the default label, the most readily available top-of-mind term for that concept in your brain. The more times you see a table and instantly think table in English, the less likely your brain will feel the need to take that detour through your native language word for table first.
You're essentially reprogramming the default access route.
You got it. And the source then suggests a way to make this even more dynamic, something specifically designed to help build speed.
Yes, the fun part.
Exactly. This is where the make it fun element comes in, and it's really effective. The suggestion is to set a timer for, say, just 5 minutes.
5 minutes. Okay.
And wherever you are, could be your living room, your office, maybe you're waiting at a bus stop or sitting on a train.
Yeah.
You look around your environment and you name everything you possibly can see in English as fast as you can.
Okay, so it's not just casually identifying a few things. It's like a rapid-fire verbal or mental list, like book, lamp, remote, coaster, mug, keyboard, screen, wall, paint, shadow, light switch, door, handle, floor, rug, dust.
Yeah.
Just Going nonstop for 5 minutes.
Exactly like that. That speed element is absolutely critical here. By forcing yourself to name things quickly, one after the other, you're deliberately putting pressure on your brain.
Pressure to perform faster.
Yes, pressure to bypass the slower, multi-step translation route. You literally don't give yourself time to think native word for book and then translate to book. You need to go directly from seeing the book to retrieving the English word book instantly.
I really see how that works.
Okay.
This game actively trains the speed of your English word retrieval, not just the knowledge of the word itself.
Exactly. It's a very practical, targeted way to break the old slow translation habit by making the new habit, direct English access, faster and more efficient. You're building fluency not just in vocabulary knowledge, but in vocabulary access speed.
Which is crucial for actual conversation.
Absolutely vital. You're reinforcing that direct link and specifically adding a time pressure component. The faster you can become at doing this internal or whispered naming, the faster you'll naturally be able to retrieve the words you need when you're actually trying to speak to someone.
Okay, that makes a ton of sense. So we've got step 1, simple internal descriptions. Step 2, actively naming objects directly, especially with that speed game. Where do we go from here? What's the next step in building up this internal English fluency?
Well, once you start feeling more comfortable accessing those individual English words directly and quickly, the natural progression, according to the source, is to start thinking in full sentences.
Graduating from words to sentences.
Exactly. You move beyond just labeling single items, table, chair, to actually combining those words into more complete thoughts and expressions. Still, primarily this is happening inside your own head, at least initially.
So taking the building blocks you've just been practicing, naming the nouns, maybe some adjectives, and actually starting to construct something meaningful with them, putting them together grammatically.
Precisely. So instead of just seeing the weather outside and thinking the single word sun, you start forming a complete sentence about it in your mind. Or remember the bus example. Instead of just thinking the word bus,
You practice thinking the full sentence, like the source suggests.
I'm waiting for the bus. And maybe even add more detail. It's late today. See? You're forming a sentence that describes your current action, I am waiting, related to the object, the bus. And then you're adding another relevant simple sentence about its status. It's late today.
You're connecting ideas, subject, verb, object, maybe some extra info.
Right, or thinking about your immediate surroundings. Instead of just thinking desk or computer when you sit down to work, you might practice thinking, I'm sitting at my desk now. Or my computer screen seems very bright this morning.
Okay. You're expressing more complex ideas than just single labels. You're practicing forming complete thoughts using verbs, subjects, objects, maybe adjectives and adverbs, and connecting them grammatically, all internally.
Exactly. And the source really highlights something crucial here. Consistent daily practice is absolutely essential for this step to start feeling natural and become automatic. You have to do it regularly.
Makes sense. Habits need repetition. And it suggests integrating this sentence thinking practice into daily routines. Why is that particularly helpful?
Yeah, that's a great tip. Using routine activities is perfect because these are often tasks that don't require your full, intense mental focus. Think about things you do almost on autopilot.
Like washing dishes, maybe? Or getting dressed? Commuting?
Exactly, those kinds of things. Or maybe preparing a simple meal you've made 100 times, folding laundry, maybe even light cleaning. When you're doing something familiar and somewhat automatic, part of your brain is kind of available. It's not fully taxed by the task itself.
Okay, I see. So there's spare mental bandwidth.
Precisely. And that's the ideal time to engage that available mental capacity in this practice. You use that free brain space to form English sentences about what you're doing, what you're seeing or hearing around you, or even just thoughts that drift through your mind during that routine activity.
That makes it much more achievable. Less mental load from the main activity means more mental resources available for the language practice. So like, while I'm walking to the grocery store, I could be narrating internally in English.
Perfect example. You could think, okay, I am walking to the grocery store now. The sky looks a bit cloudy today. I hope it doesn't rain. What do I need to buy? Right? I definitely need milk and some bread. Maybe some fruit too.
Just a running commentary in English.
Exactly. Or while you're cooking dinner, okay, the water's boiling now. I should probably add the pasta, right? Pasta in. Need to set a timer. How long? 10 minutes. Yeah, 10 minutes.
These are simple, often repetitive actions, which gives you lots of low-pressure chances to practice constructing sentences in English about real, immediate events and actions.
Exactly. You're building the habit of thinking about your actions and your environment using English sentence structures,
Yeah.
directly linking the language to your lived experience in real time.
Okay, so we've built up from single words and simple descriptions, step 1, to actively naming objects, especially with speed, step 2, and now we're constructing full sentences about our immediate reality during routine moments, step 3. What's the peak of this internal training sequence? Where does the source take us next?
Right. This next step, step 4, is where, as the source puts it, things get really interesting. It's about taking that internal practice to the next level by simulating actual conversation.
Simulating conversation? How?
By having what the source calls silent conversations or imaginary dialogues entirely inside your head.
Ah, okay. So moving beyond just narrating my own actions or thoughts and actually imagining a back and forth interaction with another person.
Exactly that. You conjure up hypothetical scenarios, or maybe you replay recent interactions you had, and you mentally formulate the entire exchange, both sides of it completely in English. It's like doing a mental rehearsal for real-life communication.
Okay, let's really break down that coffee ordering example the source uses. How would that silent conversation play out internally, step by step, if I were doing this practice?
All right, let's walk through it. Imagine this scenario. You're walking up to the counter in a coffee shop. Your internal thought process, practiced in English, might begin by anticipating the interaction itself. You think, okay, here I go. What should I say? How do I order this? You're basically priming your mind for the task, using the target language.
Preparing the opening line.
Right. Then you mentally formulate your specific request, the actual sentence you plan to use. You think, okay, I'll say, hi, can I have a latte, please? You've constructed the exact English phrase you need.
Okay, that's my part. But a conversation isn't a monologue. It involves someone responding.
Exactly. So the next crucial part of this silent practice is to anticipate and imagine what the barista in this case, is likely to say back to you. You might think, okay, the barista will probably ask, would you like that hot or iced? Or maybe they'll ask, what size would you like?
So you're running through the probable responses they might have based on the situation.
Yes, you're considering the potential flow of the conversation. And then, based on your actual preference or need, you practice formulating your response to that imagined question from the barista.
Ah, so if I wanted it hot, I'd think.
You'd think, and I'll say, hot, please. Or if you anticipated the size question, you'd think, and I'll reply, a medium, please. Right. You have mentally rehearsed not just your initial line, but also a potential follow-up exchange, the dynamic part.
Wow, okay, I can immediately see how incredibly valuable this is. You're not just practicing forming isolated sentences anymore. You're practicing the actual flow and rhythm of a conversation.
That's the key difference.
You're practicing anticipating questions, formulating relevant and quick answers, managing the turn-taking. And you're doing all of this entirely in English, but in a completely safe, low-pressure environment inside your own head.
Absolutely. And the direct benefit that the source highlights is crystal clear. By regularly engaging in these imaginary conversations, you are proactively preparing your brain for those real-life interactions when they happen.
You're pre-building the pathways.
Exactly. You're essentially preloading the common conversational patterns, the typical questions and answers for various scenarios, into your active English processing system.
So when the real conversation about ordering coffee happens, or maybe asking for directions, or making a simple purchase at a shop, your brain has already kind of practiced accessing the necessary English words and structures for that specific type of scenario.
Precisely. You won't feel as much need to pause and mentally translate from scratch because you've already run a version of that script internally. Your responses will likely feel much more automatic, they'll come out faster, and feel more natural.
It's like athletes visualizing their performance before a game, or musicians practicing scales and arpeggios over and over.
That's a great analogy. It makes the actual performance, the real conversation, smoother, more intuitive, less effortful, because the groundwork has already been laid internally.
Let's think of some other quick examples where this could be useful. Maybe meeting a friend you haven't seen in a while.
Yeah, definitely. You can imagine the opening exchange. Internally, you think, okay, what will they probably ask? Maybe about my weekend, right? So how will I respond? I'll say, hi, great to see you. How you doing?
My weekend was pretty good, actually. I went for a hike. Then they might ask, oh, cool. Where did you go hiking? And I need to be ready to answer that. I went up to the mountains just outside the city, near place name.
See, you've practiced a likely conversational thread. Or maybe asking for directions if you're lost in a new place. Classic scenario. You'd think, okay, I need to ask someone for help. How do I phrase the question politely? Maybe. "Excuse me, sorry to bother you, but could you please tell me how to get to the main train station?" Then I need to anticipate their answer. They might point or say things like, "Go straight down this street, turn left at the traffic lights, it's on the corner opposite the big bank." I should try to visualize understanding those phrases. What if I don't understand? Okay, I need a backup phrase. Sorry, could you possibly repeat that a bit more slowly, please?
You're preparing for contingencies too, or even just talking about a movie you saw.
Sure. Think about a movie you watched recently. Imagine telling a friend or colleague about it. You formulate the description in your head. "Oh yeah, I saw a movie title last night. It's a mentioned genre, each sci-fi film. Basically, it's about, give a very brief one-sentence plot summary. Overall, I thought it was, give your opinion, really exciting, a bit slow, hilarious, thought-provoking. The special effects were amazing. The acting was really good. The story was a bit predictable." You practice putting those thoughts into English sentences.
Wow, yeah. The possibilities for this silent conversation practice are practically endless, aren't they? You could practice for job interviews, handling customer service calls, making small talk at a party, describing a technical problem at work. Pretty much any situation that's relevant to your own life and your reasons for learning English.
Exactly. And the more varied the scenarios you practice in your head, the more flexible and prepared your brain becomes for navigating a wider range of actual real-life interactions when they pop up unexpectedly. It's a truly powerful technique for accelerating your fluency in spontaneous, unplanned speaking.
Okay, so just to quickly recap this whole core training sequence we've unpacked from the source. We start small and internally with simple descriptions of our surroundings. Step 1. Then we move to actively naming specific objects, focusing on direct association and using that speed game to build retrieval quickness. Step 2. From there, we graduate to thinking in full, grammatically structured sentences, especially during routine activities. Step 3. And finally, we simulate entire back-and-forth conversations internally, preparing for real interactions. Step 4.
That's the progression laid out. It's quite logical, starting with basic word concept association and gradually building up towards more complex communicative practice. But the key is that it's all happening internally first, to build that fundamental habit of bypassing the translation step.
Right, building the foundation inside your head. Now, the source also brought up a really interesting point about culture, didn't it? Something that kind of underscores why developing the speed and directness in English thinking is so important, maybe beyond just grammatical accuracy or personal ease.
Yes, absolutely. This adds a crucial layer of context. The source makes the observation that in many English-speaking cultures, particularly maybe in North America or the UK, there's often a noticeable value placed on thinking quickly and responding relatively fast in conversations.
It's not just about what you say, but also the timing of when you say it.
To some extent, yes. It's often seen as part of effective, engaged communication. The source notes that in many common everyday situations, people generally don't expect or leave space for a long, silent pause before the other person responds. There's an implicit expectation of a relatively prompt reply to keep the conversational ball rolling smoothly.
And this is probably most apparent in more casual, informal settings, right? Like just chatting.
Definitely. The source specifically points to casual conversations, shooting the breeze with friends, quick informal chats with colleagues at work, everyday transactions like ordering food or asking a quick question in a shop. In these settings, the expectation is often to answer fairly fast and naturally. The pace of informal spoken English can be quite brisk sometimes.
Okay, so what happens then if you, as a learner, need to pause for several seconds, maybe 5, 10 seconds even, to mentally translate your response?
Well, even though you're just doing the hard mental work of translating, that longer than expected silence can sometimes inadvertently make the conversation feel a bit awkward or maybe uncomfortable for the other person.
That breaks the rhythm they're used to.
Exactly. That pause, which feels necessary to you for translation, might be unconsciously interpreted by the native speaker in different ways. They might wonder if you didn't understand the question, or maybe if you're hesitant to answer, or perhaps if you're just not fully engaged in the interaction. It disrupts the expected rhythm and flow that many native English speakers are accustomed to in casual chat.
Okay, so this cultural insight really throws a spotlight back on why those internal brain training techniques we spent time breaking down, steps 1 through 4, are so incredibly valuable.
It connects the internal practice to the external reality.
Yeah, it's not just about achieving some kind of theoretical grammatical correctness or even just feeling personally more fluent. It's also about enabling you to participate more comfortably, more effectively, within the actual social dynamics of English conversation, where, in many contexts, that speed and natural pacing are genuinely valued.
Precisely put, true fluency isn't just about knowing the words and grammar rules. It also encompasses the ability to process and produce the language at a speed that allows for smooth, natural interaction within the typical cultural context of its use.
So, the faster you can get at forming those sentences in your head through consistently practicing those steps, like internal narration, object naming, silent conversations, the more natural, the more fluent, and ultimately the more comfortable you're going to sound and also feel in those real-world conversational situations where quicker responses are often the norm.
It's about trying to align your internal language processing speed with the typical external conversational speed you'll encounter in many English-speaking environments.
Makes perfect sense.
And that consistent internal practice, happening even when you're not talking to anyone, is really the most effective way to build the kind of automaticity you need to bridge that potential gap and bypass that time-consuming translation step that causes the delay in the first place.
So, the overarching message from the source material seems really clear and actually quite empowering. If you genuinely want to significantly improve your spoken fluency and sound more natural when you speak English, you need to make a conscious habit of practicing thinking in English every single day.
Even when you're not speaking out loud.
Especially when you're not speaking out loud, that internal work, that mental practice, is absolutely fundamental.
The internal fluency really does drive the external fluency. It's like building the muscle memory, forging those automatic connections in your brain that eventually free you from having to rely on that slow translation loop.
This has been incredibly insightful, really practical too. I feel like we've really understood the why behind the translation habit now.
Got into the root cause.
Yeah, and now we also have a clear step-by-step how a method to actually train our brains for more direct English thinking, plus that important cultural context highlighting why speed matters.
It's definitely a journey, isn't it? It's not going to be an overnight fix for anyone. But these steps, taken together, they provide a really concrete path forward that anyone can start walking down today.
Absolutely. And speaking of starting today, based on everything we've just discussed from the source material, we want to leave you with a specific 3-part challenge, something you can try out right away.
Okay, step 1 for today's challenge. Consciously spend just 5 minutes, set a timer, actively naming objects around you in English. Really try that speed game technique we talked about. Look around wherever you are and just name everything you see as fast as you can for those 5 minutes. Feel the pressure.
All right, step 2. Choose one simple daily activity you'll be doing later today. Maybe it's while you're making breakfast tomorrow morning, or walking the dog tonight, or waiting in line somewhere. During that activity, practice thinking in full English sentences about what you are doing or what you're seeing or hearing. Do it silently, just inside your head.
And finally, step 3. Pick a common short scenario that you might realistically encounter. Could be ordering a drink, asking for some simple information, maybe just a quick greeting, and asking how someone is. Take a minute or two and imagine having that short conversation entirely in your head. Formulate both what you would likely say and what the other person might say back, all in English. Run through it mentally.
Give those 3 steps a genuine try, maybe even just once today, and just notice how it feels. It might feel a little strange or effortful at first. That's totally normal. But remember, you're actively working on building new mental habits, carving new pathways in your brain.
Exactly. And we genuinely love to hear from you about this. Do you often catch yourself translating in your head? It's such a common experience. Knowing you're not alone can be helpful.
Definitely. And how have you tried to break that habit in the past? Or what strategies do you currently use to try and think more directly in English? Feel free to share your process, your successes, even your challenges.
Because these internal practice techniques we've discussed today really are the bedrock, the foundation for building genuine, spontaneous fluency. And, next time we're planning to continue building on these ideas, we'll be exploring another really powerful technique mentioned in the source material.
Oh, yeah. What's that?
We'll be looking at how you can use strategic repetition, not just blind repetition, but smart repetition, to really reinforce your learning. How to make new English words and phrases actually stick more effectively in your memory.
Making them more accessible.
Exactly. More accessible for faster retrieval, which ties right back into thinking and speaking more quickly.
Okay, that sounds like the perfect follow-up to today's deep dive on building these direct thinking pathways. First, build the roads, Then make sure the vocabulary traffic can flow quickly down them.
Something like that. So yeah, definitely join us for that discussion.
You won't want to miss it.
And until then, keep talking, keep practicing these internal techniques, and really try to embrace and enjoy the whole journey of learning and using English.
Absolutely. And maybe leave you with this final thought to mull over, something that builds on everything we've talked about today regarding internal language. If you make a sustained, conscious effort to really integrate English into your constant, ongoing internal stream of thought, using it to describe your world as you see it, to narrate your actions as you do them, to imagine your interactions before they happen, what does that fundamentally change about your day-to-day, moment-to-moment relationship with the English language? What happens when English starts to become the language not just of what you intentionally say out loud, but increasingly the language of what you naturally think? Something to ponder until our next deep dive.